Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe. This is the weekend edition where we interview notable people from the world of real estate investing. Today is no exception. We have a great guest. He's a repeat guest on the show. He's none other than Mr. George Ross. George is best known as co-star of the TV show The Apprentice. He worked for Donald Trump for 47 years as his right-hand man, and he taught at the law school at NYU for over 20 years. He's the author of 2 best-selling books on real estate and negotiation. Today's show is an excerpt of a conversation I had with George earlier this week. We're talking about a specific case study on negotiation. Here we go with George Ross on negotiation. So, George, you wrote the book Trumpstyle Negotiation, which, if I understand correctly, George, was your course syllabus. The outline was your course syllabus from when you were teaching at NYU.
That is correct. And I had given the syllabus to the publisher, and he liked it. And he said, you know, this would make a good book. You got to put in some of the stories that are actual things that happened. And then I think it would be a very good book, and it would sell well. And it did. It did sell very well. It sold out in well over 100,000 copies throughout the world.
Oh, fantastic. That's amazing.
Which is unusual for a book, of that nature.
Especially a business book, exactly. I mean,
yes.
You sell 10,000, 20,000, but 100,000 is extraordinary. That's fantastic.
I'm still getting royalties after all these years.
Wow. Fantastic. Well, what I thought we would do tonight is do a little bit of a deep dive, really using the book as an outline for the discussion. We've got a real-life case study, and in some ways you can't make this stuff up.
That's true.
Just a more normal type of negotiation. It's involving a purchase of a piece of property. It's got a couple of wrinkles to it. Why don't we jump right in, and we'll start with number 1.
Let's go.
Okay.
This is very interesting. This is going to be one of the better sessions we're going to have, because you're dealing with actual case studies, and you're now looking at, say, good, what do we do now?
Exactly.
How do we solve the problem, which is difficult, with more than one person involved, which happens not too infrequently, unfortunately. So there's a lot to be learned, and especially because these are actual cases. I didn't know it until you sent it to me, and I thought you just dreamt them up, but these are real things.
Yes, they are. All right, so let me set it up here. So the case study involves a land assembly. It's 3 parcels. At the heart of the 3-parcel assembly is a restaurant called Silver Spoon. The owner of the building, his name is Ron, and he used to operate Silver Spoon, the restaurant. He eventually, after running it for, 20 years, sold the restaurant to a good friend of his. His name is Paul, and Paul has been operating the restaurant ever since. So now Ron is leasing property to Paul, the restaurant operator. There's a few years remaining on the lease, I think about 3 years remaining on the lease, but Paul has 2 more options on the lease to extend the lease. So he could extend the lease for up to another, 12 to 15 years, something like that. And we would like to purchase the property, demolish the building, and put up a high-rise or mid-rise 10-story building on that site out of the 3-parcel assembly, about 100 condo units, and that property would have a commercial ground floor with the possibility of reopening that same restaurant on the same corner. But of course, during the period of construction, the restaurant would have to disappear for a period of time. Now, the building owner initially was not interested in selling. Eventually he said, I'm ready to sell. I want to retire, I want to spend more time in Florida. And he came up with a number that we thought was a little bit high. It was 20% higher than it should have been. When you look at it from a developer perspective, developers don't look at comparable sales or multiples of net income or anything like that. We look at what can we build on that site and what is the cost per buildable square foot using a residual land value analysis. So in the end, he wanted about $3.2 million, but then layer on top of that, he wants us to buy out the restaurant owner and buy out these remaining options on the lease and give the restaurant owner a salary for the 2 years that the restaurant is not going to be operating, with the hopes that at some point, once the new building is built, he would occupy the new space. So he wants the restaurant owner to be compensated for his time that he's not operating the restaurant. So that's kind of the setup of the situation. If I was to knock on your door of your law firm and say, George, looking to negotiate this deal.
Hey, here's the problem. How do I solve it?
Exactly.
Right? That's what you say. What do we do to solve it?
Exactly.
Okay. That's I understand the problem. They want the answer.
Yeah.
Interesting that you have here. You have a multiple situation where involved in any one transaction, you got a number of different players with different ideas or different things that interfere with the overall scheme, and they have to fall into place in order to make it happen. So what you have to do here, what you have here is two different situations. You have the owner of the property who wants to sell and retire and wants to get paid for the value of the property, whatever you may agree. You have yourself as the buyer that's willing to do it, provided I get it at the right price, and I have to solve the problem relating to the operation, the restaurant, which is there on a long-term lease, which would interfere with my purchase of the property and my utilization of it. You have another wrinkle, and the other wrinkle which you presented is that the owner of the restaurant, the operator of the restaurant, and the owner of the building are friends.
Yes.
All right. So that creates a different problem. Let's say a different problem is, how do you separate the negotiations? You can't leave them in that position. You can't leave them as friends. You got to deal as if they're separate and distinct. So you have to decide in dealing with the owner of the property and then dealing with the tenant under the lease and getting the time and the ability to work it out. So that's the wrinkles, but that's not unusual. In any major transaction, you could have any number of people that are involved in making the thing happen. I've had it, for example, 5 owners of lots that you want to build a building covering all 5 owners. You got to deal with 5 different people. And if you don't solve the problem with 5, you have nothing. So you have to work with the facts that are given. In this instance, the facts are pretty clear. So what you would do, or the appropriate way to handle it, is to take the most important one first. And the most important one is the owner of the building, the owner of the property. Because what you want is you want to buy the property. You like to buy it with a long delayed closing so that you can do whatever environmental or everything else you want to do in the interim period, so that you don't have to pay the whole purchase price without having the real utilization of the property, because you're planning on tearing down and building as part of a total structure. So that is the most important one. If you can solve that one, you have to solve that first. And it's easy. When I say it's easy, conceptually it's easy, because you've already agreed on the price. Not agreed. You think you want to pay what was the number? I think
we'd rather pay $3 million. He wants 3.2.
Yeah, all right.
We're not far apart.
That's the area of disagreement. In other words, the area which we would call that's in dispute. He's a 3.2. You're at 3 million. Somehow that's not the stumbling block. That's not impossible to resolve, assuming that there was nothing else that you had to be concerned with, which is not the fact here.
Right.
So the way to handle this would go to the owner of the building and say, yeah, I'd like to buy your property. However, you have the problem with the lease, and I need time to go solve the lease. And the lease runs out in 2 years, so I may need the whole 2 years. So I want to enter into a contract with you in one form or another, where I have the right to buy the property for $3 million and close it in 2 years. Or I could close it sooner, assuming that it's available. So it's my option. So the key here is to get your leg in the door by getting an option. Give me an option. I'll pay you money for the option. You give me an option to enter into a contract for you to buy it for $3 million or for $3.2 million, whatever we agree upon, and give me 6 months or 3 months an option so that for me to work it out. Now, if I can't work it out, you keep the option money. So the option money could be whatever amount you agree upon. You want to make it as little for the purchaser, and the owner might make it higher, but meanwhile, he's not hurting. It's found money. You know, it's just nothing happens, except if you give him $25,000, $50,000. I don't know what you're going to give him that you could work. And if you don't close in the 6 months, you don't solve the problem in 6 months, then effectively keeps the option, and he owns the property. So that's
how we approached it to begin with, and we started at, in fact, you mentioned 50,000. That's actually the number we started with. And he said, look, for guys like you, 50 grand, if you lose 50 grand, it's not going to change your life. I want it to be a large enough number that if you walk away, it hurts.
It hurt. Well, no, the only way work away it hurts. Question: the approach or the defense to that is like, hey, you're getting money that you didn't have. This is found money for you. I'm giving you 50 grand for 6 months. What's better with that? At the end of 6 months, you have 50 grand more than you had before, or you have a deal that we agreed upon. And you have and at that point we'll agree. If now we can build on it or end it up sooner, I'll give you more. So you make it a two-step transaction. I'll give you $50,000 now. If I can solve the problem with the restaurant, I'll give you another $200,000 or whatever the number is.
Right.
So what have you got to lose, owner? Nothing. That's the sale. What's he going to say? No, it's forget whether or not you can afford it. The answer is, wait a minute, do you want to sell the property or not? If you want to sell the property and retire, you're giving me the property with a problem that you created. You're the one that put this restaurant there, and you gave them options. So if I can't solve the problem which you created, I shouldn't be penalized. So I'm ready to throw $25,000 or $50,000 on the table to give me an opportunity to try to solve the problem. Why doesn't that work for you, owner? And the answer is it does. There's no defense to that.
I love that.
Other than the fact that he wants to be greedy. Why greedy? I would buy the property today for the price that we're talking about. We could agree on a price, but you can't deliver it without the tenant. And who created the tenant? You did. Who gave him this long-term lease with options? You did. He was a friend. So what you have to do is you separate the friendship aspect, the owner of the building from the owner of the lease. Now, I assume that you could do it because it makes sense for the owner. So we now sign a contract that I get an option to buy the property for the 7 million, whatever the number was,
3.2,
and you give me 6 months to either do one of things. If you keep the option money, or we have a firm deal, and I'll give you a larger deposit. So what you've done now is you've made money in 6 months, and you know you have a good deal. So we don't have to renegotiate it. We put in all the terms. And so the terms could be, I want a 2-year closing. I don't want to do it now. And I want to get all the representations that I would get there. You got good title. I want a clean deal, except for the problem we have with the restaurant. You can make a deal with the owner, assuming he wants to retire. And the way you do that is you say, nobody's going to buy this place, buy your building with the crazy lease you put there. Who makes a lease at this point? You give the guy long-term options.
Well, moreover, it's a situation where he's the centerpiece of a 3-parcel assembly.
Yeah, that's you don't tell him that.
Well, he knows that. I mean,
I know, it's fine. That's okay. Yeah. He's the centerpiece. So he said, yeah. So he says to you, well, yeah, but if you don't tie up my piece of property, you can't build what you want to build. That's his concern. Is a good point to negotiate because he's important to your building.
The counter argument is that we have the piece on either side. The
counter argument is yes, that is absolutely true. But meanwhile, you're giving me a defective piece of property, and who created the defect? You did.
Right.
So now, in order for me to accomplish what I want to accomplish, I have to cure your defect. So let's enter into a contract where I'm going to give you a deposit, which we can negotiate,
right,
and give me 6 months to solve the problem. So either that time I come up with more money, or we have no deal, and you keep the deposit. How do you lose, owner? You don't.
Yeah. That's very good.
So you don't. Now phase two. Phase two now is assuming you get through with phase one, because if you don't get through with phase one, you'll never get to phase two. Now you have to talk to the owner of the restaurant. We're dealing now with Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And you go to Paul and say, look, I want to buy the property. I want to do it, but you have a restaurant and your lease runs out in 2 years. I wouldn't talk options. Your lease runs out in 2 years. I would like to buy it and pay you to get out. So if you last the whole 2 years, I'll pay you for the 2 years. If you get out sooner than the 2 years, then I will pay you for what you would have lost, in assuming you operate the restaurant at a profit. So I want the right to cut your lease off short, and I'll pay you for what you would have lost if you operated. What do you want to do? You don't want to operate the restaurant. Lease runs out. Now, you have to look at the lease, and you wouldn't talk about the terms of the lease. What is the rent going to be? What are the terms of that existing lease? So as part of buying, of getting the option from the owner, you get a copy of the lease.
Yes.
And you see how good the lease is. Is it a sweetheart lease or is it a tough lease? Also, it could be the fact that the restaurant operation has changed, and what do you want to knock your brains out for this way? If I gave you a couple $100,000 and you didn't have to operate the restaurant, that's found money at this. You don't have to worry about, are you going to get customers? What are you going to do? Everything's changed. Now, the other thing that you could throw in, if he says, well, I really want to stay and I would exercise the options, that's assuming that he's aware that he has the options. He may not know I have the option, may not have looked at the lease. And he may just know, well, yeah, my lease expires in 2 years. And he doesn't say, yeah, but I have options. He may not remember that he has the options. What are the options? Is it a higher rental? I don't know what the terms are. You know, because you get that information from the owner of the property, because you get a copy of the lease. So you know exactly what your exposure is. Now, assume one of two things. He says, okay, give me X dollars and I'm out tomorrow. Okay, you may not want to give him the X dollars and out tomorrow because you need time to go devote your due diligence. So he may say, well, I want you out tomorrow, but I want to know in a year, 6 years, 6 months, whatever it is. So I'll give you this. We'll enter into the contract now that you give up the lease and I'll give you X dollars in order to do it. And not an option to buy your lease, or I'll buy your lease, or an option. I don't care. Anyway, you tie up the restaurant portion the same way you tied up the ownership portion. Now, assume that he goes back, and these are assumptions because we're not there. Then he says, well, hey, the restaurant is very, very, very profitable, and I'm going to exercise my options, assuming he remembers he's got options. And say, okay, well, how about I replace your restaurant in my new building? If you want to be in the restaurant business, I'll give you a brand new restaurant in my new building, albeit you'll be out of business for a couple of years while I'm in construction. But then when you come back, you get a lease you can live with, and you're in a brand new building, and you got X number of dollars for the inconvenience of getting out sooner.
So in that scenario, we wouldn't actually even need to pay for the option, because we're basically transferring the option to a new property.
Yeah. So you build in a lease advantage that he couldn't get in the new building if we were just operating, if we were buying it after the building was built. So I'm saying, fine, I'm going to build a restaurant. I'm going to build it up to specifications and do whatever it is, and I'm going to pay you for the inconvenience you're involved, and you're going to make money in a restaurant. So now I have a building with a restaurant. Obviously, it's a successful restaurant because it's been in business for so many years, and it gives you an opportunity to maintain it, and you have a profitable restaurant at an attractive rental.
I like that.
Now, the attractive rental could be nothing, pay taxes or what have you at this point, assuming that's equivalent to the money you would have paid to get rid of them.
Wow.
So instead of paying rent, what happens at this, you get out, I pay you for your loss of time, or you stay the 2 years and get out at the end of 2 years, and I'm giving you some extra dollars off your rent in the new building. So I'll give you a rent concession of a year, 2 years, whatever it is, to make it attractive, because to operate your restaurant.
Wow.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, it works.
Yes.
It works because when I say there's nothing that they're going to lose. He's protecting his position, but you have to find out what it is. And the only way you can find out what it is when you're in a position to make a deal and say, all right, let's get down to facts. Here's what it is. I want to buy your restaurant. What do you want? How much do you want to sell your restaurant for?
And we need to be doing that direct.
As if you don't have anything for the ownership of the deal, for the owner. However, one of the things is the owners know each other. The restaurant guy knows the owner of the building. They were friends. So they're going to talk.
Yeah. Which
is fine. But they're not bargaining one against the other or negotiating on behalf of the other. You separated it out. Restaurant, here's your deal. Owner, here's your deal. and it works. If you don't separate it, it's not going to work.
That's brilliant. And yeah, and this is why we have these conversations, because we had been negotiating with the building owner who had been negotiating on behalf of the restaurant owner, and it's not a direct communication, so we don't really know what the restaurant owner wants. And there's this kind of this blind situation.
And it's not only a blind situation, it's fraught with problems.
Yes.
When I say fraught with problems, since he's a friend, the owner of the building says, hey, if I get you now, your losses would be, if you were out of business 2 years, you lose $100,000. If I get you $300,000, I want some money.
Right.
Because I negotiated good on your behalf. So, or the other way that goes on, the owner of the restaurant could say, hey, if I can get you more money for the for the sale of your property by being a pain in the ass or a stumbling block, I want something from you. So you have to eliminate that as a bone of contention by separating them. Now, you wouldn't have it if they didn't know each other or like each other.
Right.
So if you had a tenant who's a pain in the ass and the landlord wants to get rid of them, the owner wants to get rid of them, that's one thing. You don't have that. So if they were the usual landlord-tenant relationship was not friendly. It's that they live with each other, but it's not friendly. I'm paying too much rent. I'm not paying enough. I get problems with whatever it is. In this instance, you got an additional wrinkle. They were friends. They were sold, and he gave them this lease, which was long-term, and said, you bought the business. Whatever it is, you got to cut that tie in order to negotiate it properly.
That's brilliant. Now, one of the things you talk about in the book, you talk about 3 tenets of negotiation. You talk about establishing rapport. You talk about establishing trust, and the culmination of the negotiation it's not a number like 3.2 million. The culmination of the negotiation is satisfaction of the parties, which is intangible. That's true. So break those apart in this particular instance using this case study. Well, break it apart in the first. The breaking it apart is important. How do you break it apart? Right. In order to break it apart, you've got to learn. You've got to ask a lot of questions. And the first one is, since we've been dealing in the first instance with the owner of the property, and he says he wants to retire. First question, say, what do you want to retire for? Why? I'd like to hear the answer. I'm sick. I'm tired of businesses, but I need the money. I want to hear the answer, because I'm going to ask the question of the answer. So he says, well, I retire. I really need some money. For what? What do you need the money for? I want to hear the answer. How long? Why now? Why did you decide to sell it now? I want to hear the answer. And when I hear the answer, I can react to what the answer is to see what my next question is going to be. But assume that he says, I want to retire. I want X years old. I've had it, and I want to retire and go to Florida. Why did you pick Florida? What are you going to do in Florida? I'm going to buy a house. What kind of a house? How big? You're going to buy it all cash, or you're going to buy it with a more? You see what we're doing? Right. I'm now getting geared to give my answers depending upon what he says. So now, once I know what he really wants, I can tailor my proposal to match what it is. So he says, well, yeah, I want to know I've got enough money to retire. Suppose I got you an annuity where you got $50,000 a year for 10 years, 20 years from the insurance company. Wouldn't that show now that you're protected, you got an income for 10 years, you don't have to worry about it? I got to hear the answer. He doesn't know. I threw him a curveball. He said, hey, that wouldn't be a bad idea. Well, what happens if I buy an insurance policy? You have $50,000 is not enough. I need $100,000. Okay. At least I know where we are. I know the area of uncertainty. He says he's looking to retire. That doesn't mean he has to get a lump sum. Well, in fact, he said that once he has a lump sum, it's actually a problem for him, because today he's got an income stream and a lump sum doesn't generate cash. Fine. How about this? Good. Let me solve your income stream. Right. I'll replace your income stream if that's what you want. And he already told you that. You got the answer. So he says, yeah, if I get a big lump sum, I don't know where to invest it that I would get my income stream. Hey, I'll solve your problem. I'll get you the income stream, but you can't have the lump sum. You get it over a certain period of time.
So as part of it, I will get you an annuity from a major company where they will pay you X number of dollars a year for 10 years, 20 years, or what have you. I'll give you the equivalent of a life insurance policy, which will give you the income that you're looking for. So I will cover the investment possibility or probability of which you don't have to worry. Can you buy it? Sure, in a minute. You can take a certain amount and give it to an insurance company, and they will give you an annuity payable over every year. So there are lots of ways to solve the problem, but you have to know what the problem is. And you hit one on the head when he says, I don't know what I'm going to do with the money. I like the income stream. Let me show you how to get an income stream.
Yes.
Now, the more you talk and you show flexibility, the easier it is to make an ultimate deal, because you're solving, or you're not solving, you're answering the problems with the other solutions he's raising. So I'll make it easy for you. How much do you need to live on? You're going to Florida. How big a house you're buying? Figure out. What do you need to live the lifestyle that you want? How much of the 3 million, 2 or 3 million that I'm going to give you, are you going to use in one lump sum to buy the house? What happens at this point if you get a mortgage? So there are lots of ways around the problems, but you have to understand what the problems are. And in order to understand that, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the other party as to what they want. Good negotiation is finding out what the other side wants and then coming as close as you can to making a solution. If you don't find out what they want, you're in the dark.
That makes perfect sense. Now, one of the things that we've experienced over the course of the negotiation is that what he wants has changed over time. You know,
but that you have to pin down. No, that's your pin down. Say, Gus, we're ready, Joe. I'm ready. Say, Ron, I'll tell you what, I'm ready to sign a contract now. Are you ready to sign a contract? If the answer is no, we're not talking about terms or anything, then we have no deal. Are you telling me? He says, no, I'm not ready to sign a contract. But you told me you were planning on retiring. How are you going to retire without money? I want to hear the answer. So if you want to sell the property, I'm a buyer. I got cash. I'm ready to do it. We can make a deal. You can go to Florida or regularly go and retire nice. I can solve the problem. But if you want to do it now, now's the time. Circumstances could change. The price may go down and you may not. You work, who knows what's going to happen. I'm taking the risk out of it because we'll sign a firm contract where you get money and you know you have a deal. How can you refute that? Not and still make a deal. What's further to negotiate? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I'm negotiating the terms are negotiable, but the concept of the transaction is not. He wants to sell, you want to buy. Okay, how do we do that? We enter into a contract. What's the contract say? There's a price involved, there's a time frame involved, and there is a mutuality of interest where you have to have the trust that he thinks, or whoever it is on the other side trusts you and thinks, yeah, you want to make a fair deal because you've offered to make a fair deal. And he now has to make a decision. Does he really want to retire and sell? He's got to come to the conclusion, yeah. And what do we do? I gave him a gift of $50,000 or whatever the number was for him to make up a mind that I would sell. The worst that happens is you keep the 50 grand. The best that happens is you sold the property at a price you can agree to. It's a win-win.
One of the things, and you wrote about it in the book, is using unpredictability, in fact, as a technique for maintaining negotiating leverage. And certainly if any of the folks on the line here have watched the news, they would have certainly seen Donald employing that technique liberally at times.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about that and where that fits.
Well, unpredictability is something that is always there, and you can throw it on the table and just say that it's there. So you can now, looking at this piece of property and say, values are going to do one of two things, or three things. They're going to stay where they are, they're going to go down, or they're going to go up. If we make a deal now, we solve that problem. We're ready to do it. We're not subject to fluctuation. So therefore, also your health. Assume now that you had to sell because you had a health factor that came in. All of a sudden it came, what, you're going to get the same price because you're sick? Of course not. Because now if the need becomes dire, you're going to end up with a worse negotiation.
Wow. So
in addition to that, you're part of a integrated transaction where I got 3 parcels and you're 1. One of my other parcels, I may not be able to make the deals. So that's my risk, not yours. But if you wait too long at that point, it's no deal. I can't sell it, and you're getting a higher price because you're part of a major transaction, and you're getting overpaid. Your property by itself is not worth what I'm paying you. It's only worth it because I can use it as part of a larger transaction. But if the next guy comes and can't use a larger transaction, he's not going to offer you what I've offered you. He's going to come in with less because it has less value. Now, that's not necessarily true, but it sounds good. Understand? You can't deny it.
Well, that's right. Well, yeah, because as soon as you consolidate whatever setbacks, front yard, side yard setbacks, rear yard setbacks, they disappear.
Yeah.
So you get to utilize more.
But you're not telling him that.
Yeah.
That's you. It's just, you're not telling him. He's not a builder at that point. He's an owner of a piece of property. Yeah, it makes it attractive for you to buy it in the overall scheme because you're putting it as part of an assemblage. Right. And it works. I don't have to worry about side lots and whatever. And I can build higher or pretend, whatever it is. It says attractive. If it was a single parcel, it would be attractive the way I'm doing it. It's not a single parcel. It's a 3 parcels transaction. Or it could be 5, whatever it is. It just happens this time that it's 3. So if you find out, by asking the appropriate questions, what the other side wants to do, you can figure out how can I make it happen, meet your needs at least halfway, or I can't meet them. I can't guarantee this. So it's easy. When I say easy, conceptually, it's an easy negotiation. It may take a period of time, and you may have to come to the realization. But it's like as right now at this point, suppose you owned 1,000 shares of General Motors, and you put it up for sale. Do you think it's going to go up or down? If you're selling it, you think it's going to go down. But you're selling it to me, I buy it. I think it's going to go up. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. So everything is triggered on a point in time to do a particular transaction. And you have to be satisfied, now is a good time to do it and make it attractive so that they would do it. And in this instance, from what you're telling me, it's very attractive for the seller because he wants to retire.
Right. I love George's perspective on negotiation. He is such a master. He breaks down the problem with such surgical precision. And every time I talk with George, he shines a spotlight on what I need to focus on. And hopefully by examining this real-life case study, you got to learn something about negotiation as well. As you think about that, have an awesome rest of your weekend. Go make some great things happen. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.